Hello, a very warm good evening to all of you and welcome to Unacademy, your one-stop destination for English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the fourth session of Environment in our Conquer Prelims module, where today we shall be covering important areas and news topics which have remained relevant for the past 12 to 18 months for the portion of environment, where you can expect a question to be framed from that particular topic or from the surrounding areas as well. Now, this is the fourth lecture for the series of environment. In the previous three sessions, we had dedicated the first session to look into the protected areas and the Ramsar sites, national parks in news. In the second session, we basically looked into the various different species which have remained in news. Then yesterday we discussed about the international organizations and various climatic conventions which have remained in news for the past year, and today we shall be picking up those unique topics which have been relevant enough. Now, here again, today also we will follow the same module of and the same pattern of discussion with the help of questions and discussion of the surrounding topic. Now, before we initiate the discussion, an announcement regarding UAIPMT, where Unacademy brings for you the most authentic prelims mock test, which is very representative in terms of the type of questions, in terms of the timing, in terms of the pattern of mixture of dynamic as well as current affairs topic and the static portions. And more importantly, once you appear and attend this particular test, you can always end up understanding what are the areas where you are committing mistakes, and with the help of the live discussion that we will have, you will be able to eliminate those mistakes forever and add on to your existing knowledge set as well. So do appear for this test on 26th of May, where the GS paper shall be held as per the UPSC time from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and the CSAT paper will be held from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Now, having said that, let us initiate the discussion for the portion of environment with the help of the questions, and we start with the first question of the day for the topic which has remained prominent for the past 5 to 6 months, and that is the topic of Humboldt Enigma. So which of these statements is the closest description of Humboldt's Enigma? Closest description. Presence of a lesser variety of biodiversity in the tropics despite a higher level of solar insolation. Creation of a desert on the margins of continents due to cold ocean currents. A general increase in the biodiversity as one moves away from the coastal area to the region of the interior. Mountains being the host of greater number of biodiversity as compared to the plains in the similar latitude. What is Humboldt's Enigma? Now, Humboldt is a name that you would have heard about in terms of the region of South America, where you have the presence of cold ocean currents, where the Peru current is also referred to as the Humboldt current, right? And you have certain peaks which are also named after Alex Humboldt. So that is why Humboldt has always been a very significant researcher in terms of understanding the various geophysical activities which span across the planet Earth. Now here, if you notice the question carefully, it is not asking you about the definition of Humboldt's Enigma. It is basically the closest description of the Humboldt's Enigma. So here, the correct answer is going to be D, that is mountains being the hosts of greater number of biodiversity as compared to the plains in the similar latitude. Good that majority of you have given the correct answer here, but it had been in news quite prominently for the 5 to 6 months previously. So what is this Humboldt's Enigma exactly? Now, the basis of Humboldt's Enigma is driven from the fact that biodiversity in terms of species richness, in terms of number of species, in terms of genetic varieties, that is very dominant in the tropical regions of the world. And this is an important fact. Okay, please listen to this carefully. When we talk about the tropics and the tropical regions of the world, Here, the diversity is very, very high, and it has remained historically high. What are the reasons for this? So, high species diversity in the tropics. What are the reasons? So, there are two prominent reasons for this. What are those? So, high species diversity in tropics. So, here, the two reasons are important for you to understand. Questions can be framed from here also. First is that in the region of tropics, the amount of solar insolation which is received is high. So that is a natural derivation, that if the amount of solar insolation received is high, so automatically the amount of productivity generated by the plants by the process of photosynthesis, that will also be on the higher end, right? So high solar insolation leading to high productivity. This is the easy point, right? What is the other point? Why is it that you have a higher biodiversity? That is because when we talk about biodiversity in general, it is tied to the historical aspect as well. Here you have to understand that when we talk about the region of the tropics, they have had a similarity of climatic conditions going back for thousands and millions of years. When we talk about the entire planet going through various glacial cycles and also ice ages that actually have an incidence upon the planet Earth, it is the temperate areas which can get absolutely frozen. But when we talk about the tropical regions tend to remain ice-free throughout the year. So that is why here, owing to the consistent climate for the past many millions of years in the tropics, where the temperature on an average has been higher than around 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, there is a consistency of conditions. So the region of tropics have a consistency of conditions, or what are referred to as abiotic factors. So for any particular ecosystem, you have two factors which are responsible for the type of species that you have in an ecosystem. You have the biotic factors and you have the abiotic factors. What are the biotic factors? For example, if you consider the various consumers, producers, decomposers, they are the biotic factors of an ecosystem. Abiotic factors mean the conditions of temperature, insolation, availability of water, conditions of soil, etc. That is basically the abiotic factors. So, consistency of abiotic factors through the history of the planet, right? So, that is why it is in the region of the tropics that you will have the highest biodiversity which is present. Now, the general understanding has been that as you move away from the region of the tropics, the level of biodiversity starts to reduce. However, Humboldt's Enigma represents a kind of a departure from this normal condition. So, the normal condition is biodiversity is highest in the tropics and reduces as you move away from the tropics. Humboldt's Enigma talks about the fact that as you move away from the tropics, while there can be a declining trend of biodiversity, but mountains, they form an isolation. Isolation in the sense that those are islands of rich biodiversity and species richness. In the region of the mountains, you have a large variety of different kinds of species which can survive. Mountainous regions which are a depiction and an embodiment of what we refer to as ecotones. They basically house a large amount of biodiversity. So even as you move away from the tropics, there can be areas of very high biodiversity. Why? Because when we consider, let's suppose a mountainous area. Now in this mountainous area, let's suppose you are at the foothill here. Okay. Now in this region, whatever the temperature conditions would be, whatever the amount of, let's suppose, rainfall would be or water availability would be, That would be different as you move higher up from the foothills to the region of the top. For example, generally if we consider the mountains in India, for example, the northeastern region of India. In the northeastern region of India, we have fold mountains and very lofty mountains which are present. So at the foothills, generally you tend to find tropical forests, right? So there can be tropical forests, and they can basically be of two types. In certain areas, you can have broadleaf evergreen forest. And what are the other types of tropical forests that you will find at the foothill of the mountains? You will find moist deciduous. So here, other than this, you can also have moist deciduous, depending upon the type of region that we are talking about. Okay, then let's suppose you move slightly higher up, the temperature tends to reduce. As the temperature reduces, you will start finding the presence of temperate forests. Let's suppose you go at an elevation of 1500 to 2000 meters from the sea level. Here you will find temperate conifers. Temperate conifers. Now here also there is a variation. At the lower elevation around exactly 1500 meters, you will find temperate evergreen in certain cases. As you move higher up around 2000 meters, 2500 meters, that is when you start finding species such as cheer pine, then deodar, those commercially viable trees, that is what you start finding. As you move higher up, there you start to find at an elevation of around 3000 meters, you will find alpine meadows or seasonal grasslands. Seasonal grasslands. And then higher up in elevation, you will find the tundra vegetation with the presence of mosses and lichens. So that is why. So for example, let's suppose if you consider the foothills, consider the region of Himalayas itself. In the region of the foothills where you have dense vegetation, you will find species of tiger population also. You can find species of rhino, one-horned rhino also. You will find amongst the thicket of the bushes the presence of elephants also, deer population also. So a wide variety of faunal species and many different varieties of birds. So that is what you find. As you move higher up, you start finding species of ibex. For example, mountain goats and ungulates, that is what you start finding. So, for example, we had discussed about Mishmi Takin. Now, Mishmi Takin and, for example, Tibetan ibex, all of them are to be found at greater elevations. Further higher up that you go, you will find species of, for example, snow leopards and so on. So that aspect where the mountains hold a very rich biodiversity richness, that is what is Humboldt's Enigma. Now, why it is relevant in India? When we talk about India, we have one of the most diverse areas in terms of biodiversity, which is present in the northeastern region, in the northeastern stretches. Okay, now there it is a very relevant and a very important and critical biodiversity zone as well. From species of hornbill to various different species of, when we talk about arboreal monkeys, to the terrestrial mammals, you find a wide variety, as we have been discussing for the past couple of days as well. Okay, so that is what is Humboldt's Enigma, right? Himalayas are, but Himalayas are in tropical region. No. Himalayas, if you take a look at it, Himalayas are beyond the tropics. What is tropical region? Between the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. That is the region of the tropics. And Tropic of Capricorn, where does it pass in India? It passes from the states of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Tripura and Mizoram. Himalayas clearly are to the north of that. Right, so it is beyond the tropics. Okay. Baobab species are basically to be found in very limited quantities in India in the region of Andhra Pradesh, but they are not naturally to be found of that area. baobabs are endemic to the region of Madagascar. Okay? I hope no doubt exists in this area. Now, next we come to the second question. Consider the following statements with reference to Diel vertical migration. What do we understand by Diel vertical migration or DVM? It is observed by birds traveling long distances to increase their speed as they travel. The timing of the migration is tuned to the natural rhythms of sunrise and sunset. It helps in carbon sequestration as well. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Out of the three statements, what represents Diel vertical migration or DVM? It has been prominently in news. So here, good. Significant number if you have given the correct answer. Right. So here, it is observed by birds traveling long distances to increase their speed as they travel. That is incorrect. Okay, so automatically this particular option set allows you the liberty of elimination, even if UPSC allows that or not. Here we allow you that. So here by eliminating one, you are able to reach the correct answer. But nonetheless, you should be aware about what this is. The timing of the migration is tuned to the natural rhythms of sunrise and sunset. So this is a daily occurrence. Then it helps in carbon sequestration as well. That is also correct. So the correct answer in this case is going to be B, that is 2 and 3. So what is this Diel vertical migration and why it has been prominently mentioned in news in various different places? So it is a kind of a daily movement of species in the water bodies. You see, when we talk about the marine or the aquatic ecosystems, largely the oceanic and the seas across the world, you will find that in various different layers, you have variety of species richness. But then, majority of the species, if you notice their movement, this particular chart represents that unique characteristic. So here, what you see in this particular chart is particularly important because these green, yellow and the red dots that you have, these represent the density of species. So here you observe that during night time, species are mostly located closer to the surface. It is during the daytime, when you have the daytime, observe where is the density of the species at a lower level. And again during night time, observe that the species are again coming closer to the surface. So there is a daily migration which happens with the case of the marine species. Why is it so? So that is basically because when you observe various different zooplanktons, for example, here take the case of copepods. So these are the prominent zooplanktons in the area. Now these zooplanktons, if during the day they start straying closer to the surface, they can be preyed by the various predators of the aquatic ecosystem, by birds as well. So that is why during the daytime, in order to escape that particular predation, they stay at a lower level. Please understand that they have a kind of a decision that they have to make. All these marine species, they have a decision. First of all, when we talk about the overall productivity of the marine ecosystem is maximum where? Closer to the surface or at the bottom? Where do you think the marine ecosystem will have its maximum productivity? Is it going to be the surface or at a lower elevation? Always closer to the surface. Why? Because of the presence of sunlight. When you have the presence of sunlight closer to the surface, that will lead to a large number of phytoplanktons carrying out the process of photosynthesis. And these phytoplanktons, they form the base of this entire marine food chain system. Right. So here, that is where you have the food available. So closer to the surface, you have the availability of food. But closer to the surface, you can be killed as well. You can be consumed by the predators as well. So they have a decision to make, whether to choose starvation or to choose predation. So in between this particular predicament, they choose a daily migration. So during the daytime, they go at a lower elevation, and during the night time, they come up. Now, how is it that they help in carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is what? Capturing and storing of carbon and carbon compounds, isn't it? So here, let's suppose they come closer to the surface. Now, when they come closer to the surface, they will consume these phytoplanktons. Now, phytoplanktons are what? These are plant species. Basically, these are microscopic and microorganisms which carry out photosynthesis on a daily basis. So as they carry out photosynthesis, they will consume carbon dioxide, absorb from the surrounding area, absorb from the atmosphere. So they will be storing that carbon dioxide. Now, once these phytoplanktons are consumed, let's say by these copepods or any of the zooplankton, now as they move down in their excretion and in the various different organic form, they release and they discharge that carbon, which gets stored and locked at the ocean bottom for a very prolonged period of time. So that is where they are able to facilitate the carbon capture by capturing it from the atmosphere with the help of the phytoplanktons, consuming those phytoplanktons, going to the depth, and eventually leading to the discharge of the carbon at the oceanic bottom. It is followed by the marine organisms, that too particularly the plankton species of marine organisms. That is what you have to understand. Okay? Now, next question. Which of these statements best describe tropicalization? Again, mentioned in news. Increased concentration of biodiversity in the tropical regions of the world. It is observed predominantly in marine life. It is impacting the survivability of species in the temperate regions. So select the correct answer. Which of these terms best describe what we refer to as tropicalization? So here, if you take a look at the first statement, second and third, look at them carefully. Okay? So here, the first statement, increased concentration of biodiversity in tropical regions of the world. Is that a reality? Yes. Is that known as tropicalization? No. Then, it is predominantly observed in the case of the marine life? Yes. It is impacting the survivability of species in the temperate areas? Yes. How so? We will take a look at it. So here you will have C, that is 2 and 3, which are correct. So here basically if you take a look at what is tropicalization, due to increased incidence and frequency of marine heat waves, you have migration in the global oceans of the species from the tropics into the temperate areas. Okay, so here you observe this, that marine life is fleeing to the poles due to elevated sea temperatures. So what happens is, let's suppose when we consider the entirety of the planet, generally due to global warming, right? Global warming and due to marine heat waves. So due to these two conditions, the oceanic or the sea surface temperature across the globe is rising. Sea surface temperature is increasingly prominent. Sea surface temperature rise is increasingly prominent. Now here, when it comes to temperate areas, let's suppose the temperature earlier was 15 degrees Celsius. Now it is becoming around 18, 20 degrees Celsius in certain cases. But when we talk about tropics, Earlier, the average temperature, which always till now in many of the areas, is around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius. In some cases, it has been found out to be reaching the level around 30-32 degrees Celsius as well. Now, that high or sudden departure of temperature means what? Means the species are unable to tolerate that. And here again, important parameter relevant for your prelims. Again, another important terminology relevant for your prelims. When it comes to marine species, their thermal tolerance level, is it higher as compared to terrestrial species, or the thermal tolerance level is lower as compared to terrestrial species? What does your logic tell you? That when it comes to the marine species, thermal tolerance level is higher or is it lower? Very good. It is particularly lower. So why is that? Because historically they have evolved in an ecosystem where the temperature doesn't change drastically day by day, season by season, year by year. Temperature remains consistent. For water to gain temperature, for water to lose temperature, it takes a lot of time. So water maintains that temperature. In fact, the last time planet experienced such an exponential rate of warming of the sea surface was close to around 90 to 95 million years ago. And that was because of huge amount of basaltic lava volcanic eruptions which rocked the entire planet. It was at that point of time where you had the Reunion Island eruption as well, very vital for the formation of the region of the Deccan Traps. It was around that point of time where you had a series of various different seamounts, etc., to be created in the region of Atlantic and the Caribbean islands as well. So here, understand this, that as the sea surface temperature is rising, the species which are typically found in the tropics, they are finding safe refuge in the temperate areas. The ideal example of this is the region of Mediterranean. Mediterranean is beyond the tropics. I hope that is understood. I hope that is clear. Now, Mediterranean is basically experiencing increased number of species coming from the region of tropics. And so is the case with the other species in the other oceans as well. That is why nowadays you will find that even humpback whales and other different varieties of whales which would rarely visit the polar areas, they are also very frequently going to the polar regions in order to consume krill. Krill population which exists in large numbers, these humpback whales, they visit the polar areas. Now once these species, they start visiting the temperate regions, the polar regions, what happens? Those species which were already present in the temperate and the polar areas, they are now going to find increased competition. So the level of competition for the species will increase, isn't it? For the availability of food. Now here, there will always be greater number of species in the tropics as compared to the temperate. So if more number of species are coming in, that means what? The existing species will find it very difficult to still continue to gain their ideal food sources. That is why you get the statement that it impacts the survivability of species in the temperate regions because of increase in the rate of competition. Okay, so that is basically what is tropicalization. Tropicalization is observed in the marine life. It is the escape of the species from the tropics to the temperate areas in order to escape the harsh conditions in the region of the tropics. Okay? I hope this is understood. Now, moving on to the next question, which is again very vital for the exam. Which of these are considered to be the tipping points for inducing an uncontrolled climate change across the planet? Strengthening of West African monsoon leading to increased greenery in the Sahel region. Dieback of the Amazon rainforests in South America. Collapse of the Himalayan glaciers. Out of these three, which of them are considered to be the climate tipping points. What do we mean by climate tipping points? These are those particular events, once they get initiated, then they can lead to an exponential level of warming. They can generate their own feedback loop system where a particular event can keep on heating and recurring of that event again and again. So that is the tipping point. We will take a look at what are the various climate tipping points across the world. So here, strengthening of West African monsoon leading to increased greenery in the Sahel region is a tipping point. Why? We'll talk about it. Dieback of the Amazon rainforest in South America. What is this dieback? Why don't we simply say the death or the removal of Amazon rainforest? What is this term dieback? Dieback is the term which is used where, if let's suppose in an area you have very dense vegetation, now the trees, when they start dying or they are removed, and in its place you have grasses which start replacing them, right? A grassland ecosystem is generated. So there the density of trees will reduce. There will be greenery in the form of grasses, but the density of the trees, the density of the forest will reduce. So what does that mean? That basically means it is a kind of a dieback. Collapse of the Himalayan glaciers. While all the preconceived notions will tell you that it can induce a tipping point, it can induce a feedback loop, but it does not. So here the correct answer is going to be A, that is 1 and 2 only. Okay, so that is basically the correct answer. 5% of you had given the correct answer. Good. Karakoram anomaly is different. Karakoram anomaly is about the fact that while across the globe the glaciers are receding, in the region of Karakoram the glaciers are increasing, the ice cover is increasing, but that is not the case with the Himalayan glaciers. Himalayan glaciers are basically melting in general. So let us understand what these climate tipping points are. So these are the major climate tipping points that you observe across the planet. So for example, here, let's suppose if the heating of the planet is within 2 degrees Celsius by around 2100 or by whatever time limit, if the heating is less than 2 degrees Celsius, then you will have the Greenland ice sheet collapse, you will have the Barents Sea winter ice which is lost, boreal permafrost which will start melting, glacial loss in the region of the Patagonian Peninsula, then West Antarctic ice sheet will collapse, low latitude coral reefs, particularly within the tropics around the coral triangle, they will start to die, Labrador Sea gyre which is generated, which helps in the entire thermohaline circulation, that will collapse. Then boreal forest in the region of Siberia, there the dieback will start to happen. So what does this lead to, and why is it that we refer to it as a climate tipping point? Let us understand one of these examples with the help of Greenland ice sheet collapse. So let's suppose when we consider the region around the Arctic, now there you have the presence of ice sheet, okay, that is thick cover of ice. Now under normal conditions, the ice has got a reflective quotient of around 0.8 to 8.85, means around 80 to 85% of the solar rays, they are basically reflected back. Only around 15% is absorbed. But let's suppose as the temperature increases, this ice sheet starts to melt. So as there is melting, means what? Melting will induce the exposure of thinner ice and water that will be exposed. Now this thinner ice and water, they are largely transparent, they are not as reflective. So here you will find greater reflection, greater absorption of solar rays because of lower albedo, isn't it? you will have a kind of a lower albedo. Now, because of that, albedo is what? The reflective coefficient. Now, as a consequence of that, temperature will increase in the region. As the temperature increases, it will fuel further melting and the process can feed itself. It is a feedback loop. Similarly, let's take the case of the greening of the region of Sahel. Sahel is the region to the south of the Sahara Desert. It is a region of savanna. It is a region of grasses. Now, at one point of time around 18,000 years ago, the region of Africa, particularly northern portion, was recipient of very heavy monsoonal rainfall. It is only in the present position as the region has moved further north that it lies under a subtropical high pressure zone, creating an absolute dry condition. But earlier there used to be strong monsoon. Now let's understand how that strong monsoon in the Sahel region will further lead to the warming. So here, if in this area you have increased occurrence of rainfall, very high occurrence of rainfall, what will that mean? Greening of this area, isn't it? Greening of this area would mean what? Increased amount of vapor to be present in the air at that region, right? Increased vapor concentration. Now, water vapor, is it a greenhouse gas? When we talk about water vapor, is it a greenhouse gas? The answer is yes. The water vapor has got the capability, the capacity to absorb heat, retain heat. So what will it lead to? It will lead to more warming, isn't it? Then, for example, so this process will continue further. More warming means what? It will further fuel the creation of low pressure here. So the surrounding areas will start becoming drier. This is the region which will continue to get hotter and hotter. That is the thing which is already happening in the region of Indian Ocean, where particularly in the region of the Indian Peninsula you will observe, even in the case of the Arabian Peninsula you will observe that the temperature during the summer conditions are getting hotter and hotter. As a result of that, you have heavy amount of rainfall concentrated in a short span of time, more frequent occurrence of cyclones and storms. That means the drying of the remaining area. Now let's suppose we consider the Amazon rainforest dieback, or even when we consider boreal forest southern dieback. So when they are replaced, now this is a rainforest. Unlike the region of Sahel, it will have a different impact. Rainforests are naturally the ones which provide moisture in the region of equator, and in that region of equator they help in daily occurrence of rainfall. It is not a seasonal occurrence like monsoon. It is a daily occurrence of rainfall. So when you have that daily occurrence, it also helps to reduce that temperature. That is why equator is not the warmest place across the planet. The warmest place across the planet is where? In the tropics, beyond the region of the tropics, in the subtropical high pressure, right? So these rainforests, be it in the region of Amazon, be it in the region of Indonesia, Borneo, Sumatra, here if the rainforests are getting removed, that daily occurrence of rainfall, that will not happen. Means what? You will have more drier conditions. Drier conditions mean what? The forests won't be able to sustain themselves. Means what? There will be more death of the trees. Means what? Again, lesser amount of rains. So that is basically what you observe. So dieback induces lesser moisture. Lesser moisture means less rains. Less rains mean again a dieback. So this is a kind of a cycle. Similar is the case when you consider Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, that is going to collapse. Now Atlantic meridional overturning circulation is what? It is a thermohaline circulation, where basically water goes to the region of the higher latitudes, and there after cooling down it sinks and then returns back. right? You have an entire distribution of heat across the global oceans. Now, due to global warming, this is going to collapse. Why? Because the polar regions are also warming up. So as the water moves to the higher latitude, it doesn't cool down enough. So it stays in the same area without dipping into the depth. What does that mean? It has two implications. One on biodiversity. The species living in the benthic zone, the bottom zone of the oceans, they are not getting the nutrients anymore. And secondly, as the water stays in that area itself, it will get heated significantly much more. That is why it will basically induce a kind of more storms in existence. Okay? Melting of Himalayan glacier is a consequence of the tipping point. Why not so in the region of Himalaya? So majority of you have the confusion with regards to, so you have two confusion. One is about why Himalayan glacier is not a tipping point, and secondly, what is dieback, right? These are the two confusions. Yes, as the AMOC circulation will slow down, so water staying in the same region will continue to get heated up and it will induce more tropical storms in the region. Now, why is it that melting of Himalayan glaciers is not considered to be one of the tipping points? First of all, a part of it is Karakoram anomaly, that in the western portion, due to western disturbances, the winter precipitation is bringing snowfall. So it is in the western portion of the Himalayas where you will find that the amount of ice cover and snow cover is consistently on the rise. And secondly, when you consider these areas of the Himalayas, the glacial ice which is present, it is restricted to the top elevations only. So there, they are not responsible for the generation of any kind of circulations thereby, which can have a long-term impact. So that is why it is not considered to be, what is a tipping point? That if that happens, the planet will continue to heat in an uncontrollable manner, right? So that is not happening. Secondly, you have to understand the fact that the ice and the glaciers which are present, they are present at an extraordinary high altitude. So at that high elevation, around 7,000, 6,000 meters, it is not like Alps, which are at a lower elevation and still have ice and snow cover. Here they are present at a very high altitude. So that melting of glaciers itself. So even when we talk about the melting of glaciers around Gangotri or Gomukh, for example, we are talking about isolated these melting events at an isolated portion. We have till now not observed a large scale collapse of the Himalayan glacial system. Okay, so even in the region of Central Asia, the details of the glacial ice which was studied by World Meteorological Organization as well, and in the last IPCC 6th assessment report as well, it indicated glacial ice loss in the region of Central Asia, but not in the region of Himalayas. It indicated glacial ice loss in the region of Tibet, but not in the Himalayas. Because the Himalayas continue to receive precipitation during the winter due to western disturbances, that is why it is continued to remain intact, and it is not a large ice sheet as compared to the poles. That is why. Now, second, when we talk about dieback, so what do we mean by dieback? So dieback is when the dense forests are replaced by grasses. Which grasses? By tropical grasses. Why are they replaced? Because of dry conditions. Okay? That is why. So that influences the circulation cycle. Circulation cycle is impacted. So understand, every warming phenomena is not a tipping point. Okay, we don't say that, for example, dieback of Western Ghats forest. No, there also some of the forests are getting let's suppose replaced, or there is deforestation, that is not mentioned as a tipping point. It is only where you have such large scale phenomena which can cross the threshold to lead to an exponential reaction. Okay? I hope this is understood. Any doubts? Feel free to ask. Okay? What about the first statement? We have already talked about the first statement, and that is basically when we talk about the strengthening of the monsoon in the tropics means there will be increased vapor concentration on a day-to-day basis, means more warming, means in the next season more monsoonal rain. This is a seasonal phenomenon, not a daily phenomena. So water vapor being a greenhouse gas can induce warming. Now, moving on to the next question. With reference to artificial reef setup off the coast of Mumbai, consider the following statements. It follows the principle of bio-rock technology. It is the first artificial reef system set up off the coast of India. It can alter the local biodiversity leading to migrations. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Here. Which of these statements are correct? Good. So here, does it follow the principle of bio-rock technology? Yes, it does. Is it the first artificial reef system set up off the coast of India? The answer is no. Before that, you have had experiments and artificial reef systems set up where? Off the coast of Puducherry, off the coast of Tamil Nadu. There also you have the artificial reef system. Off the coast of Kerala also, now an artificial reef system is being set up. So the second statement is incorrect. And then here we have given you the provision of elimination. You can eliminate it, but it can alter the local biodiversity leading to migrations. Yes, it can. So here 1 and 3 are correct. So the correct answer is C, 1 and 3 only. Right? So here, when we talk about these artificial reef systems, what are these? These are being set up across the globe. Now recently, a large scale, a massive artificial reef system had been installed off the coast of Mumbai. Now it follows the bio-rock technology. Bio-rock technology involves the passage of slight amount of electric current and follows the basic principle of electrolysis, whereby when you pass electric current in a solution, you will have salts which can accumulate on the electrodes. So here, this is a kind of a bio-rock. So observe here that concrete structures, steel structures, they are basically installed. And here you will observe sometimes the floating corals, sometimes you will observe that some of the corals are induced there, and it can lead to the regeneration of corals as well. Okay, so that is the principle of bio-rock. So overall, if you take a look at it, the power source is supplied from the coastal area. Now there you have energy which is passed on, and here it acts as the anodic and the cathodic structures, and slight movement of electricity, electric charge, induces the process of electrolysis, accumulation of calcium ions. So marine areas or water bodies in the oceans, they have significant presence of CaSO4, calcium sulfate, primarily provided by the river systems. They are rich in CaSO4. Now, when the process of electrolysis happens, they also have carbonates, right? They also have carbonates. So generally, you have the presence of Ca and, right? So as per electrolysis, across these structures, you have the accumulation of CaCO3. So that builds a very strong permanent structure out there. Now what is done? Recycled waste structures having concrete, steel, they are immersed, sometimes even older boats, older vessels, they are also deliberately submerged and immersed underwater over a period of time. First of all, a very fine film of bacterial population develops. On top of that, you then have the algal population which starts coming in, and then the floating corals in the nearby area, they also start frequenting that. So that is when you have the entire repopulation. So the existing species in that area, they face some amount of migration crisis as well. But over a long period of time, is it good for biodiversity or not? Absolutely yes. Now, what can be its impact? If a statement is framed that it will lead to an increase in the income of the fishermen, local income will increase, that will also be the correct statement. How will it alter migration? So basically, let's suppose here you have more number of species in an area. Let's suppose in this area, you don't have any corals, but it is not a dead zone, is it? It is not a kind of a dead zone. So if it is not a dead zone, there will be certain species which will be prevalent here. Now, once you have created that biorock, once you have induced that coral population, a different ecosystem will develop. Corals are foundation species. We have discussed that previously. So here a different ecosystem. So the existing species which were there, they can either adapt or they will be forced to migrate. Isn't it? So the benefits is increased in income, increased amount of income, increased level of biodiversity, increased amount of fish population, better carbon sequestration, more carbon capture, control and mitigation of climate change. All these terms indicate one thing: capture of carbon. So lowering of global temperature, and then eventually that will lead to lowering of sea surface temperature as well. But there are disadvantages also. For example, many of the times in this recycled concrete and recycled steel structures, you have impurities which are present. For example, you have certain elements such as mercury. They can also be present. Now, it can lead to poisoning and some amount of bioaccumulation in terms of toxins. And those toxins mean what? It can impact the larger human population as well, isn't it? Secondly, when we apply and provide that power source, this is a very costly proposition. It is not a cheap process. It is a costly proposition. So that is very hard to maintain and to keep on operating. Okay, that is another amount of disadvantage, and that forced migration of the species, that is also a disadvantage. So it is not all positive, some amount of negative is also there. Okay, now coming to the next question. With reference to e-soil, consider the following statements. It is a technique primarily used in hydroponics. It can stimulate faster growth in the plants. It relies on electrical signals being passed through for root stimulation. So here, take a look at the options and let us know. Why Mumbai? Off the coast of Mumbai in the Worli-Kolivada region, it was observed that the fishermen's, their income was reducing. There was a depopulation of the fishes in terms of migration. That is why it was chosen as one of the areas. Okay. So here, what do we understand by e-soil? So here you have to find out that which of the statements are incorrect, not which of the statements are correct. So the first statement, what is e-soil? E-soil is a new kind of substrate which has been developed which can promote hydroponics. Hydroponics is a cultivation of plant without the usage of soil with water availability, providing nutrients directly to the roots and stimulating them. So this is the correct statement. It can stimulate faster growth in plants. It was observed in crops such as barley that it can have 50% faster stimulation and faster growth. So this is also correct. It relies on electrical signals being passed through for root stimulation. Slight amount of electrical charge is passed in order to stimulate the root growth. So here, which of them are incorrect? The answer is D. That is, none of the above are correct. So you have to be very careful and watchful for which of them are correct or incorrect. Okay? So that is the key area you have to watch out for. So basically you would observe it in news, significantly mentioned. So it was observed by the scientists in Sweden, where they observed that significantly stupendous growth in the barley plant. So 50% surge in growth with a mere 15-day period. So when we talk about hydroponics, in hydroponics, generally the substrate which is used, that requires a very high amount of energy and it is difficult to obtain as well. We'll talk about it. Now, hydroponics can also allow for greater efficiency of production. In the same smaller space, you can grow more number of plants and more frequently as well. So in the era of climate crisis, and in the era of food scarcity, hydroponics can come to a rescue even in urban areas. So, generally in the case of hydroponics, you have the usage of mineral wool. What do we understand by mineral wool? So, it is a kind of a very different fabric, kind of a substrate which is developed from stone or silica. Stone or silica. So stone or silica, they are heated up, and they are heated up almost to the point of melting, and after that they are arranged into a kind of a fabric, a mesh-like structure, a very closely woven mesh-like structure. So this is basically very energy intensive, utilizes high amount of energy because you are melting the stone. Obviously the heat required would be very, very high. So high energy level. Okay. Now, what the scientists have done, they have used a kind of a conductive polymer which was available from before. It is not something that they have invented. That is PIDOT, what is referred to as polyethylene dioxythiophene. So that is PIDOT. It is a kind of a biopolymer that is used, and their slight amount of charge is passed to stimulate more further growth. Okay, I hope that is understood. So here, hydroponics, solution to water, the solution to food scarcity, solution to climate change, solution to increased productivity from the urban areas also, and can be a solution to increase the farm income if we come to the invention of these cheaper methodologies of growth. Okay? Now, a simple straightforward question. State of Cryosphere 2023 2 degrees is too high report has been released by World Meteorological Organization, United Nations Environment Programme, International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, and Global Footprints Network. Which of them have released the State of Cryosphere 2023 2 degrees is too high report? Yes, aeroponics can also lead to significant amount of efficiency, yes. So here, this report has been generated by International Cryosphere Climate Initiative. That is the correct answer. Ideally, I would suggest to you that prepare a different A4 sheet, what I have been recommending throughout, that prepare a different A4 sheet for the reports and indices, and keep on revising that now almost on a daily basis. You should take a flip through significantly. Okay. So here, The International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, when was it formed? It was formed in 2009 after the Conference of Parties 15 to the UNFCCC. Where was this held? It was held in Copenhagen, right? So the Copenhagen meeting, after that, this ICCI was actually created. It talks about, and the work is largely focused upon three major areas of the cryosphere: the region of the Arctic, Antarctic, and the high mountain regions. What is the third pole? Across the region of the Himalayas, and generally across the various different high altitude areas as well. Now, what are the details and the key findings of the report? First of all, ice sheet loss is very prominent in the region of Greenland, much of West Antarctica and East Antarctica. That can trigger, right? Now observe here, if you will take a look at the previous one, when we were taking a look at the climate tipping points, West Antarctic collapse, East Antarctic ice sheet collapse, and subglacial basins collapse. All of this can happen, and earliest it is the West Antarctic ice sheet which is going to collapse, and that can trigger its own set of reactions. I hope we are aware that as soon as the continents, they started drifting away from Antarctica, that is when the Southern Ocean was created. Southern Ocean has not always been present. Earlier, you had India also joined, Africa also joined, South America, Australia, all of them were joined to Antarctica. But as soon as the Southern Ocean was created, there was an inducement of an oceanic circulation that lowered the temperature across the planet, and that brought many species to extinction. It altered the rainfall pattern in the planet for millions of years. So a slight change in the Arctic region and the circulation induced can have a cascading implication. Glaciers, irreversible ice loss is being experienced. Yes, the Corona Glacier in Venezuela has been lost across the region of the Humboldt Peak. So here, irreversible ice loss from the world's glaciers in major river basins, that will induce a further down the line water scarcity in that area also. And this report has highlighted this. If you take a look at this particular graph highlighted in this report, in the details of the report, here you will observe that this graph represents the glacial mass. So if the temperature increases only by around 1.5 degrees Celsius from present, the glacial mass will still be this much. It will reduce, but percentage of ice will still be roughly around 80% to 60 to 80% of what we have now. If the temperature rise by around 2 degrees Celsius, there can be a dip in the glacial mass, which is almost 40 to 30% of today. And if temperature rises by 3 degrees Celsius, the glacial loss can be complete. That has been highlighted with this report. As per today's activities and daily events, as per IPCC, India, or not India, but the world is staring at a temperature rise of around 4.5 degrees Celsius. Europe already in certain years is experiencing a departure of temperature by around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. So that means in the next couple of 100 years, the planet is staring at a complete loss of the glacial ice. Sea ice is going to reduce. Then here, sea ice across the region of Arctic. It is predicted that by the year 2040, Arctic will experience an ice-free summer at least once. Permafrost, the regions which are permanently frozen under a thick blanket of ice and snow. So those regions of permafrost, as they are melting, as there is thawing, so the trapped gases, the trapped vegetation, they will start emitting methane, carbon compounds, which can again accelerate heating. Okay, so at 2 degrees Celsius, basically the permafrost emissions of CO2 methane would total the size of entire EU's emissions from 2019. So you can imagine that even the Paris Agreement, What is the aim? 2 degrees Celsius. And the ambitious aim is to reduce the warming to up till 1.5. So that is what this report is talking about, that 2 degrees Celsius is not enough. Controlling the warming by 2 degrees Celsius is not enough. Already we shall be inducing changes which are going to be irreversible. And polar ocean acidification is going to follow. So year-round permanent corrosive ocean acidification condition because of rising temperature, increased carbon emissions, that will lead to a biodiversity loss. The shell-bearing animals won't be able to regenerate their shells and will have an impacted loss. Okay? Now, then, moving on to the next question, again frequently in news. Consider the following statements about cloud seeding mentioned in news recently. It is the process of creating artificial rains by providing moisture in the atmosphere to enhance condensation. It ensures formation of larger cloud pockets by slowing down the process of condensation. It can be carried out from the ground-based installations as well. So, what is the correct answer in this? So take a look at it carefully and take a look at the statements. Okay? Here again, you have to notice it is being asked as incorrect. The first statement. Artificial rain is the process of creating, or cloud seeding is the process of creating artificial rains by providing moisture. Do we provide moisture for cloud seeding? No, moisture is not provided. That is incorrect. It ensures formation of larger cloud pockets by slowing down the process of condensation. No, it rather accelerates the process of condensation. This is also incorrect. Then it can be carried out from the ground-based installations also. That is in fact correct. So here, this is basically correct. So here, which of them are incorrect? The answer is 1 and 2 only. A is the correct answer here. Okay? So, when we talk about artificial rains and cloud seeding, that was in news owing to what has happened in Dubai, where the doubt was that in the region of Dubai, it is because of artificial rains that the deluge has occurred. Even though we had discussed it in our YouTube video that how it was not cloud seeding which led to that deluge in Dubai, but something else was responsible for that. But nonetheless, cloud seeding was in news. So what do we do when we carry out cloud seeding? First of all, cloud seeding is what? To ensure occurrence of rainfall. So whatever vapor is present in the region, many of the times what happens is that you have vapor, but condensation does not happen. Okay, you might have vapor around, but condensation does not happen. As condensation does not happen, or even if condensation happens, it happens in dispersed manner. Let's suppose you have some condensation which has happened here. Let's suppose some has happened here. Let's suppose some has happened here. Now in that case, will you have a larger cloud created and the occurrence of continuous rainfall? The answer is no. So what is done? Let's suppose in an area you have some development of cloud, very weak, which won't cause rainfall. So there, with the help of an airplane or with the help of ground-based rocket systems, you basically release materials such as silver iodide, AgI. Silver iodide is released. At that particular elevation, silver iodide molecules, they act as hygroscopic nuclei. What is hygroscopic nuclei? These are those small particles which allow the condensation of water to take place on their surface. They don't repel water. So all around them, condensation happens. Now, because it is at a very low temperature, at a very high elevation, what does that mean? That water vapor will convert into ice particles. So here you have, due to silver iodide, quick condensation and quicker condensation will happen, or the rate of condensation is accelerated. Whatever water vapor is present in the atmosphere nearby, maybe it is not condensing. Due to that low temperature, they will start coalescing and condensing. So rather than a slower rate of condensation, it will be a very fast rate of condensation, leading to dense cloud packets getting created. So there will be heavier ice particles created. They will be heavy enough to cause rainfall. This is being observed and followed by many different countries. So it was followed, and it is followed in, for example, UAE for almost couple of decades and more now, in order to induce some amount of rainfall. It was also observed and followed by China before the Beijing Olympics in order to remove the pollution levels. It was also advised to the Delhi government in order to fight off pollutions this year. But this also has got some drawbacks. The drawbacks are, while it will not always end up yielding the desired amount of rainfall, there's a high cost of operation, first of all. Second drawback is that whatever moisture you have present in the vicinity, that moisture will get accumulated and it will fall as rainfall. So the surrounding areas, they risk being drier. They risk being converted into dry conditions as well. So those are some of the significant disadvantages. Okay, so that is basically where the rainfall occurs. Now, moving on to the next question. AgI is silver iodide. Okay, can due to cloud seeding cloudburst happen? No. Now, cloudburst will happen. For that, you need to have substantial movement of winds immediately before the cessation or the stopping of wind, so that the entire cloud will give way. Which of these aptly describe the term Pressmud? A new substrate discovered to augment plant growth in dry areas, residue generated out of the sugar industry, deposits along the continental shelf having excessive salinity, framework structure needed for aeroponics as a replacement of natural soil. Which of this describes Pressmud? So here, Pressmud is a substrate of the sugar industry. In the production of sugar, when you have the consumption of sugarcane and the extraction of sugar out of it, you have some of the substrates which are left. For example, you have bagasse, molasses, etc. Pressmud is just like that. So that is a residue generated out of sugar industry. Now, why it has been in news? It has been in news because, for example, a country like India, which has been the second largest exporter of sugar across the world and amongst the largest producers of the sugar in the world, along with Brazil, there has been a continuous problem that the farm income is reducing, is stagnating, because the global demand is not rising. The supply is rising, but the demand is stagnant. So that means whosoever is growing it, they are not getting that immediate amount of revenue. So to increase the farm income, there have been various schemes and programs which have been launched. For example, ethanol blending of petroleum, so that molasses, bagasse, they can be utilized to create ethanol. Similarly, the extracts from sugarcane, they are also used in the packaging industry, so that the farmers can sell that waste which they generally throw, and they can earn some money out of it. Pressmud is one of those which resembles that dark brown amorphous soil-like condition. That is what it looks like. Now here, it can be used to generate CBG, right? So compressed biogas, which is rich in methane, and that can be a source of energy in the local population, in the rural areas, and so on. So here, sugarcane byproduct can be a sweet spot for India's biogas sector. So Pressmud, this is also known as filter cake or press cake, is a residual byproduct in the sugar industry. It has gained recognition as a valuable byproduct. Now it can generate a lot of revenue. It can basically be used to generate CBG as well, compressed biogas as well. So here what is done? So basically India has always been amongst the largest producers, as you can see. Now CBG is renewable, environmentally friendly, and gaseous fuel derived from anaerobic decomposition. Anaerobic decomposition means what? Without the availability of oxygen, if the decomposition is happening, that is anaerobic decomposition. It is produced through a process of biomethanation. Okay, so biomethanation is important here, terminology for your prelims. Now what is done? Basically, when this anaerobic decomposition happens, that is when methane, understand biogas also is predominantly constituted of what? Methane. So here methane, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, some amount of moisture is extracted. Then after that it is filtered, where these impurities such as the other carbon compounds, for example, when we talk about carbon dioxide, some traces of carbon monoxide also you will find, they are removed, hydrogen sulfide is removed, all that excess moisture is removed. Then you have the fuel mixture. That fuel mixture is compressed, bottled, and can be used as a kind of a generative fuel used for production of energy. So that is where it can solve cooking needs, it can solve transportation purposes, and the government had launched a scheme for the alternative modes of transport, the Satat scheme that you would have heard previously and read previously. So this can basically end up fueling those kind of alternate transportation methodologies as well. Okay, I hope this is understood. Now, consider the following statements about soda lakes recently in news. They are very high productivity ecosystems as compared to freshwater ecosystems. The pH value is excessively high, around 9 to 11. They occur naturally in areas of very heavy rainfall. The development of these lakes is disastrous for migratory bird species like the flamingos. Which of these statements is or are correct? Soda lakes. Soda lakes have been in news because a kind of a discovery in the region of Canada, where you have a lake across an older volcanic region, what is known as the Last Chance Lake. Now that is being construed as the warm pond which Charles Darwin had postulated as being the genesis and the originator of life. So that is where the term soda lake has come from, even though I have given the answer here. So nonetheless, let us take a look at the statements. They are very high productivity ecosystems as compared to freshwater ecosystem. This is correct. The pH value is excessively high, around 9 to 11, soda lake, alkaline. So here alkalinity will be very high. Alkalinity will be significantly higher. So this is also correct. They occur naturally in areas of very heavy rainfall. Now let's suppose you don't know about this. Can you apply logic here? Yes. In areas of very heavy rainfall, what will be the salinity level? Whenever you have very high amount of precipitation, salinity level reduces because you have a net addition of water molecules. So in areas of high rainfall, salinity or the salt content will be lower. So there you won't have the salt content. So this is incorrect. The development of these lakes is disastrous for the migratory species of bird like the flamingos. This is incorrect. Because the flamingos thrive when you have the presence of these soda lakes. or alkaline lakes. Why? Because the flamingos feed on cyanobacterium, the blue-green algal species, which thrive in the case of soda lakes. But when you have reduced alkalinity, that is where the population starts to reduce. That is where, in general, you will find that the population of cyanobacterium reduces, due to which the flamingos are unable to get their food. And that is where the population starts to decline. So which of them are correct? The answer is A. That is 1 and 2 only. Okay? Right? So here you can basically apply logic. High productivity means high biodiversity always. Okay, see, many of these would be new in terms of what you have not heard or read before. You don't have to worry about it. You need to simply add it on to your existing notes. Otherwise, whatever you already know, if we discuss that only, it will be like playing KBC and there is no productivity out of it. So always look for the new additions to your content set. That will be helpful for the prelims, right? So here, a shallow lake in Canada could point to the origin of life on Earth. So what are soda lakes? They are shallow bodies of water, not very deep, which have significant amount of sodium and carbonate ions generally, much like what you have in baking soda, which comes from water and the volcanic rocks in the surrounding region. They can be found throughout the world, but are far less common than other saline bodies of water in general. Okay, so here, if you take a look at the features, so pH level between 9 to 11, alkalinity is primarily due to high concentration of carbonate, sodium carbonate, sometimes phosphate levels also, lot of sodium chloride and other salts, making it hypersaline lake. Salinity level will be high. Okay, so ecosystems, they are very productive. Most productive ecosystems across the world. So they occur both in arid and semi-arid areas, regions of reduced rainfall. Of reduced rain. Okay. Now here, just so that you don't confuse, there was a news article which had appeared in the print this year itself. So basically last month you had this article. East Africa's rising soda lakes are threatening its iconic pink flamingos. So please don't misconstrue this news headline that the presence of soda lake is threatening the flamingos. No. The statement says, or the article talks about, the rising water level in soda lakes. So across the region of Africa, you have the presence of multiple of these soda lakes across the entirety of the East African Rift Valley system. You have the older volcanic rocks there, reduced rainfall in many of the savanna region. So natural formation of these soda lakes. That is where many of these migratory species of flamingos, the East Africa flyway, we had discussed about the East African Asian flyway yesterday. They come to this region, and the flamingos, they have a very unique pattern of feeding where they turn their head upside down and they start to consume these particular cyanobacterium. But let's suppose when the water level increases, so what will be the conditions of alkalinity or salinity level in general? Or in case you are getting too much confused, alkalinity or salinity, both are what will be the content of sodium chloride, of calcium, etc. So as the water level increases, the alkalinity will reduce in general. The salt content will reduce in general. So when that happens, the population of cyanobacterium or the blue-green algae, that starts to reduce, and that is when the flamingos, they start suffering from it. Okay, so that is basically, this will impact. So soda lakes themselves they don't impact the flamingos. The destruction of soda lakes by increasing water level, that will impact the flamingos. Is that understood? So here, when we talk about development of these lakes is disastrous, no. Development of these lakes is beneficial for flamingos. But once these lakes, they start experiencing rising water level, reducing level of alkalinity, that is when it is disastrous for flamingos. Will it threaten other species like fishes? You generally have different varieties of fishes here which can tolerate this. For example, if you consider Sokar, Somuriri, for example, even the Pangong Lake system, that is also considered, some part of it is considered as the soda lake. Lonar Lake also. Okay. Pressmud can be used for production of biocoal, yes. So I hope we know about the examples of soda lake. The Pangong system, the Sokar system in the region of Ladakh, Lonar Lake system, they can be considered as example. How do they get higher productivity in higher pH regions? That is because you have the availability of large amount of calcium ions, large amount of carbonate ions. See, even when you talk about the planktons, why do the planktons grow only closer to the surface when there is upwelling? Because the nutrients from below, the ions from below come closer to the surface. So the presence of these nutrients, that is required for the growth of the producers. And once the producers will grow, automatically the consumers will flock the region. Okay? That is understood, I hope. Now, which of the following is or are correct with reference to the invasive alien species? In the short run, it increases the species richness. It increases mutualism amongst native and alien species. Islands are more vulnerable to invasive alien species. Which of them are the correct statements with regards to invasive alien species? Are we sure, Parker? So here, understand, invasive alien species. Let us look at the answer. So in the short run, does it increase the richness of species in that area? Yes, it does. Then it increases mutualism. Mutualism is what? Symbiotic relationship, where both of them will benefit. Will it increase mutualism? No. It basically increases competition, not mutualism. Then islands are more vulnerable to invasive alien species? Absolutely yes. So here the correct answer is going to be A, 1 and 3. So majority of you have given the correct answer here. In the first statement, the catch is in the short run. Okay, in the short run, always the diversity of species will increase, but then as the competition comes in, that is when the existing biodiversity starts to decline. Invasive alien species, they have been in news throughout the year. They threaten 66% of India's natural systems. They basically face challenges from the invasive alien species across the entirety of the country. Don't understand first statement. Okay, so the first statement is in the short run, that is in the immediate time period. Let's suppose an invasive species has been introduced in an area. Will that increase the diversity of the region? Yes, it will, because you have more species coming in. That will allow some other species to come in. In the long run of maybe 50 years or 20 years or 30 years, the other species will be eliminated. So biodiversity will come down. So in the long run, biodiversity will come down, but in the short run, biodiversity will be benefited, isn't it? So it is a simple English statement if you simply break it. Okay. So here, understand this. In this particular area, let's suppose you have 151 species. Okay. You have 2 invasive alien species which are introduced in that area. So in the next 1 year, how many species here will you have? 153. So is that an increase in the number of species as compared to earlier? Yes. But let's suppose after 20 years, out of these 151, 15 have died. Or let's suppose 50 have died. So while in the short run the number of species increased, in the long run how many species do you have now? Out of this 50 have died, so now you have only 103. So in the long run it will reduce, isn't it? But in the short run, will it increase or not? Yes? I hope this is understood. See, please don't be very possessive about the answers that you have given. So understand there can be other options as well. Why islands are more vulnerable? Because in the case of islands, you don't have the kind of diverse growth evolution for the various different species. In the case of the islands, you will have the species who have not gone through the evolutionary cycle, so they are very vulnerable to any existing threat, and that can be wiped out. The genetic diversity is very, very low in the case of islands, so the resilience of the species in the islands is very less. For example, when we talk about something that you can associate with, you would have heard about, at least this much you would have heard about, that there in Sentinel Island across Andaman Nicobar Islands, you had an American missionary who tried to go there, and basically he was killed by the Sentinelese people. They don't allow any outsiders to come in. The last time an outsider went there, you had a mass death in that region. Many people died, only few could survive. Why? Because for us individuals, we have gained a kind of a resilience, a resistance to, let's suppose, common cold, right? But those living in an island, they have never been exposed to it for thousands of years. So a normal flu can kill them, right? But for us, a flu is maybe something that we can tolerate on a day-to-day basis as well. So that is why when you consider regions such as Borneo, when you consider regions such as Galapagos Island, these are very, very vulnerable to any invasive alien species. Okay? Understood? Now, the characteristic of invasive alien species, they have a feature where they can be referred to as pioneer species. They can basically colonize an area. They can bring an area under habitation. Tolerant of a wide range of temperature or abiotic factors they can tolerate. They are generalist in terms of distribution. Generalist means what? Species have their own niche. You would have heard about the term niche. Species have their own niche, the requirement of biological, biotic and abiotic factors. So it is in a very generalistic niche that they can survive. Produces large amount of seed that can disperse very easily, grows aggressive root system so that they can extract all the nutrients from the surrounding. It has got a very short generation time, means grows very, very quickly. It has got a very high dispersal rate in terms of propagation, long flowering and fruiting periods, broad native range, and it is abundant in that native range. In India, you have some of the very predominant species of invasive alien species which are in news. For example, this is what is water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is also known by the name Terror of Bengal. Why? Because it absolutely is disastrous for the aquatic systems. It grows very quickly. It has got attractive pink looking flowers, and here it, as you can see in this lake, it has virtually dominated the entire lake system. Because it grows and multiplies very quickly means what? It will cover the lake, and it is a floating plant. Now what will happen to the aquatic plants naturally found in this water body? Will they get the required amount of solar energy? No. So they will start to die, right? So the other biodiversity in the long run will reduce. Then another one, so this is native to the region of Southern America. Then another one which is impacting the area of Western Ghats in the region of Kerala, that is Senna spectabilis. Senna spectabilis. So here what do you observe? That this particular plant grows very quickly, is ornamental, that is why it was introduced for ornamental purposes, but it grows so very quickly that in the surrounding region you don't have the availability of sunlight at all. So if you have had multiple plants growing in an area, if one Senna spectabilis naturally grows there, then all the other plants, they will have a stymied growth. They will have a very reduced growth. Then for example, this one, what is this? This is Lantana camara. This is impacting the population of tigers in the tiger reserves, because this grows like a bush. This is very prominent in the households across the country and in the surrounding thickets and bushes. Now, as you can observe that they grow in very dense bush, so the availability of sunlight is absolutely minimal for the other plants to use. So again, they will be replacing the original species in the long run. Then another example, this is red-eared slider turtle. This was brought in from the region of South America, again for ornamental purposes. But as they started growing larger, few of them would have been released by their owners that now we don't want to take care of them, they are too large for us. So that is when they were introduced into the aquatic systems in India. So in India, from the various different water bodies in the south to the north, you will find this red-eared slider turtle. Now here you observe the sharp claws that they have. Now this is very unlike the turtle species. So as they move around, they can damage the other native turtle species. And that is where the remaining turtle species, their shell, their body structures, they are damaged and they die. And this species does dominate in the long run. But what has been one of the major invasive alien species, particularly across many reaches of the Nilgiris, was the one which was introduced in India by the Britishers, and that is the tree of eucalyptus. Now eucalyptus in India was introduced in the 1800s, early 1800s by the Britishers. This was brought in from the region of Australia. Now it was brought in around the region of Ooty, Udagamandalam. Why? Because the region of Ooty would be so very marshy, excessive amount of moisture, that it would be very prone to malarial outbreaks. So normal habitations other than the local tribes, they would never go, because the Nilgiris would be famous that you cannot survive a particular season there without a disease. So in order to soak in that excess moisture, eucalyptus was introduced. Now what eucalyptus does, it absorbs the moisture from the surrounding area, it propagates very quickly. So if you go around the hill stations presently, you will observe a host of these eucalyptus growth. Now in the region of Nilgiris, they are replacing the natural shola. Okay, so they replace natural sholas, shola vegetation. And as the research paper also indicates, that whenever you have, let's suppose, a forest fire, whenever you have deforestation, immediately it makes news headlines. But slowly and steadily, the entirety of the shola vegetation is being replaced by eucalyptus, and nobody blinks an eye, because for us it is like green cover. But this replacement of natural shola vegetation is impacting a very important species of animal, that is Nilgiri tar. Nilgiri tar and its population is getting reduced. And that is because of an invasive alien species. So invasive alien species is one of the major threats to biodiversity. Okay? Now, next question with reference to biodiversity hotspots. So with reference to biodiversity hotspots, consider the following statements. They represent regions of highest species richness and are to be found entirely in the tropical areas of the world. There are 4 biodiversity hotspots in India. To be declared as a biodiversity hotspot, the region must have at least 1,500 species of any plant type which are endemic to the region. Endemic means basically the kind of species which are naturally to be found in that area. Okay, the species which are naturally found in that region only, nowhere else. So what is a biodiversity hotspot? These are the regions of increased species richness here. So they represent regions of highest species richness and are found entirely in the tropical regions of the world. Incorrect. There are 4 biodiversity hotspots in India. This is correct. To be declared as a biodiversity hotspot, the region must have at least 1,500 species of any plant type. No. Vascular plants. 1,500 species of vascular plants having xylem and phloem structures. So how many of the above statements are correct? Here the answer will be A, that is 1 only. Okay, so here basically the conditions required: at least 1,500 species of vascular plants have to be endemic to that region, to be found nowhere else, and the region must be endangered. That means at least 70% of its primary native vegetation, if it is lost, only then a region is declared as a biodiversity hotspot. Across the globe, we have around 36 biodiversity hotspot. All those regions combined, they represent only around 2.5% of the global area, but they support around 43% of the bird, mammal, reptile and amphibian species to be found in that area only. Okay, so you have to look at these particular granular details. Only then can you expect a kind of a confidence. These are the various different biodiversity hotspot regions across the world. As you can see, they extend even beyond the tropics in the temperate regions of the world as well. In India, you have 4 biodiversity hotspots. One is the Himalayan biodiversity hotspot, which indicates the high altitude biodiversity condition. Right? So there you will find the presence of bears, snow leopards, lichens, orchids, etc. Then you have the Indo-Burma as the Humboldt Enigma also talks about, that in the region of northeast, when you have the mountains, that is where you have very wide biodiversity. Then you have the region of the Western Ghats region, and then you have the Sunda land. Sunda land is present in the region of Great Nicobar. Okay, so this is where Sunda land is present. So these are the 4 major biodiversity hotspots in India. Okay, now consider the following statements with reference to aestivation. It is a biological phenomena whereby the animal enters a long period of dormancy. Aestivation can also be a way to avoid desiccation by the species. It lowers the risk of being preyed by a predator. How many of the above statements is or are correct here? How many of the statements here are correct? So here, first statement, it is a biological phenomena where the animal enters a long period of dormancy. That is correct. Then, aestivation can be a way to avoid desiccation means what? What is desiccation? Desiccation is the drying and the cracking of the skin. Okay, so drying and the cracking of the skin. So what is aestivation? So basically, when you have adverse conditions, adverse abiotic factors which are present, many of the species, they suspend their bodily and metabolic activities. One way is to go for a long winter sleep, and that is hibernation. Another is summer sleep. In order to escape the harsh conditions during the summer, lack of availability of water, that is what is aestivation. Now, in certain microscopic organisms, certain smaller organisms, whatever kind of unpredictable conditions are there, uncertain conditions are there, the metabolic activities can sometimes be suspended for that entire duration. So that is what is referred to as diapause. So these are various methodologies by which metabolic activities are suspended. Hibernation, in short, is winter sleep to escape the harsh cold. Aestivation, summer sleep to escape scarcity of water. And diapause, suspension of metabolic activities. So here, this is correct, that drying out of the skin won't happen. It lowers the risk of being preyed by a predator, particularly in the desert areas. This is also correct. So which of them are correct? The answer is all the three. All the three basically are the correct statements. So this has again been in news last year, the summer's urge to nap. So it generally takes place in only cold-blooded animals like frogs, mollusks, arthropods, reptiles, earthworms, snails, and so on. Generally, it is for a shorter duration as compared to hibernation. Okay, because winter can be very long, summers, excessively dry conditions can be of a shorter duration. Now, next question. Which of these organizations are responsible for launching of Coral Reef Breakthrough? International Coral Reef Initiative, Global Fund for Coral Reefs, UN Climate Change High-Level Champions, UN Environment Program. So which of them are responsible for the launching of Coral Reef Breakthrough? So here, if you take a look at this, so out of this, the first Coral Reef Initiative, it is responsible. Then Global Fund for Coral Reefs, yes. And UN Climate Change High-Level Champions, these are the three organizations which have basically created this Coral Reef Breakthrough. UNEP will be installed by UPSC in almost all such options. So you have to be very beware of this kind of an inclusion in the options. It is an easy confusing option out there. So here, this was also in news. Now, this Coral Reef Breakthrough has been launched in order to bring about a general conservation of corals, because recently you had the fourth mass coral bleaching which was observed due to rising sea surface temperature. So that is why, in order to control that, this initiative, this breakthrough was launched. So it aims to secure the future of 125,000 square kilometer of shallow water tropical coral reefs, that is warm water corals, and there would be investment which is sought of close to around $12 billion, launched at the 37th International Coral Reef Initiative General Meeting. Which were the organizations? UN Climate Change High-Level Champions, International Coral Reef Initiative, and Global Fund for Coral Reefs, with the help of the government of Sweden and Principality of Monaco. So these are the responsible organizations. This is again very vital for your prelims portion. Okay, so here, as per this breakthrough, 4 action points have been declared for the conservation of coral species, top drivers of loss. So the local drivers of loss, for example, pollution, coastal environment, overfishing, like bottom trawling, that has to be stopped. Double the area of coral reefs under effective protection. That is as per the Kunming-Montreal Agreement of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to bring 30% of the area under conservation by 2030. Point 3, accelerate restoration by various other processes so that carbon sequestration can be carried out. And investment by the private players also will help in conservation of the species. Right? So these are the important topics which have remained in news, and that basically the final portion is about International Coral Reefs Initiatives. So when was this Coral Reef Initiative created? It was formed in 1994. after the first conference of parties of Convention on Biological Diversity took place. Immediately after that announcement, it was created. So it is a global partnership, not only by the nations, but also the organizations, the NGOs, which work in that area. It was founded by 8 governments. Presently, it has got 101 members. India is also a member of this. Australia, France, Japan, Philippines. These were the initial founding members. Okay? With that, we come to the end of the discussion. And together in these 4 sessions, we have managed to discuss more than 60 topics. More than sufficient for your revision period. Any particular magazine, any particular source of information that you pick up, these particular discussions are not only comprehensive, but have got a greater amount of analysis as well. Do use this for the revision. The portions that you know, that the questions that you have got correct, still there would be certain options where there might have been confusion created in your mind. So do look at that. Analyze your mistakes. Work upon your mistakes. Only then can there be a path to improvement. Tomorrow, we meet again for the marathon session, the final session for environment and ecology, where we shall be discussing a mixture of species, protected areas, all of those in news. Now, I hope today's session was helpful. How many questions did you get correct? Write it in the comment section, not in the live chat, but in the comment section. And if these sessions have been helpful to aid your preparation for environment and ecology, please don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. We meet again tomorrow. Till then, take care of yourself. Goodbye and have a good night.